can hear stuff. We only live in Queenborough. You only got to go like that at night and you can hear that. Oh,
That's the wind, isn't it?
no! The wind doesn't go. Woo-hoo.
Hello and welcome to another video, and this is my attempt to getting 2 videos out in a week. So you should be seeing this on Friday. If I don't make it, it'll be Saturday or Tuesday. So let's hope. Today we are looking at the Isle of Sheppey, and mainly 2 locations in the Isle of Sheppey. That is Sheerness itself and over by Queensborough. And I've got to say thank you to some local people on the Isle of Sheppey on the Facebook groups and some of the other local Reddit sites. If it hadn't been for them, I would have gone down a dead end on one certain location because I was completely confused about it. But yes, anyway, the Isle of Sheppey. For those who don't know where the Isle of Sheppey is, it's actually in Kent, on the east end of Kent. You'll find it just below the River Medway, and that is what creates the island around it. It's on the banks of the Thames, so it's like the Thames estuary, and you've got the Medway going around it. And I'll stick a map on it because I made a right mess of describing that. But yeah, it's technically an island, and was an island till the first road bridge was put on there back in the 19th century. And before that, it was a ferry service. You had to get a ferry across there, and it was your only way to get onto the island. The island itself was invaded by the Vikings in 1853 AD, so it's got a lot of old history in England. It was used as a pool, but the Isle of Sheppey's name comes from sheep, so it's the Isle of Sheep. But saying that, I don't think I've ever seen sheep on the island. May be wrong, but every time I've gone there, I've not seen it. We are going to start today by looking at Sheerness. Now, Sheerness is at the most northern part of the Isle of Sheppey, and what we're looking at particularly is where you've got the leisure centre and Tesco's Extra now, and it's that seawall area behind it. When I started digging into the paranormal history of the Isle of Sheppey, again, Neil Arnold, his books, I can't fault those. There's websites out there that list stuff about the Isle of Sheppey. Again, I want to go to, on this one, the lesser known ones that, lucky enough, some community members from over there gave me a good steal on them. But also, one that you should all know if you've know anything about the Isle of Sheppey, and it's Deadman's Island. And a pub that's caused me a lot of confusion, and I just want to say hello to the people and the landlords, Mark at the pub, and I think it was Ellis, I'm not sure, he pretended to be Mark at one point. It was all very confusing for me, but we'll come to that later on. So where we are at the moment, we're at the northern point of the Isle of Sheppey. We walk down the sea wall. As you walk down this sea wall, I mean, I put a photo up actually on the community page on YouTube, and people said, is it Southend? And technically, yeah, it sort of is. It's a bit Yard of Grain, and you can see Southend in the distance, and that's because it faces Southend. And my daughter was always wanting to see Southend from the other side, so she was quite happy to go up there and have a look. But yeah, the ghost side of it, the Isle of Sheppey is covered in little ghost stories, from phantom hitchhikers to vanishing cars to beasts to white ladies, grey ladies. We've got it all there, and monks, and we're going to cover some of those. And ironically, a monk is the first one we cover today. I know in my previous video I said about it always being monks, but what can I do? So the first story we're looking at a ghost of a monk. Now, this monk seems to have a lot of energy for a dead person. He's seen to walk from Minster Beach right the way up to Garrison Point in Sheerness. So that is quite a walk for a ghost. And it seems that if you see the ghost on the first night, you're more likely to see it the second night. What do I mean by that? Well, it seems going back in history. Now, when I say go back in history, we can take a few side reports from the 80s. And this comes from people who walk along there at night time with their families or go for a walk with their dog. And it would seem that if you see the ghost of the monk at Minster, and then the next night you're walking along up by Sheerness, you're likely to see that figure again. I don't know how it's working out. It sounds a little bit confusing to me, but that is the folklore that goes along with this. So what we have in August of 1982, we have a couple walking along with their young daughter, and the young daughter points out and says, "Mum, what's that over there?" The mum looks up. They are walking along the seawall by Minster, and towards them, walking along the bottom level by the beach, they see a figure of a monk dressed in black, no hood, just a monk dressed in black, walking along. But the daughter describes it as a bit of a glow. Now, the daughter is one that reports this back to the BBC years later. The BBC done some heavy research on the Isle of Sheppey. I think it's Look East. They've done a few on there. And I think I'm going to put a clip at the beginning of this video to show something they said at the beginning. So I'm assuming these reports all feed from the BBC's interviews. And she said this monk had a glow about them. The dad grabbed the daughter and pulled her closer to him. And they're staring at this monk, and he just walks on the beach. And what I noticed, that his feet are making no sounds in the stones and the sand. He's walking silently along. Now, apparently the sea was dead calm, and they could hear birds and a few little waves, but the feet of the monk was making no sound. He carried on walking towards them, and he... Hold on a minute, I've got to use a word. Got to remember what the word is. Hold on. As they watched the monk, he dematerialised. That's the word I think I've been told I've got to use by one of the users. He said it sounds more spooky. Not when I've started laughing about it. But, and I said, yeah, but I'm more to the point. Yeah, he disappeared, he vanished, he vaporised, he faded out. He dematerialised in front of their eyes. This, of course, shocked the family, and the daughter screamed and started crying. The mum grabbed the daughter, and unfortunately you still got to walk along a bit of the wall to be able to get off. As they got to where the stairs are that led up, the dad looked back and he see the monk carried on walking further down towards Minster. The next day, not wanting to walk back down that way, they went up to Sheerness. Now they started off by where Tesco's is now. I don't think Tesco's was there at the time, but that is where I remember as a kid being taken to the Isle of Sheppey, and I think that little amusement park was already there. So I think there's got the leisure centre next to it, and there's a little shop, and that is where they parked there. And they went down onto where I actually start filming here, and started walking towards Graveston's Point. As they're walking along now, again they see this monk walking along the shoreline. This time they've taken no chances. They grabbed the daughter and went back to the car. Now I'm aware of some old churches on the Isle of Sheppey. I can't find where this links into this monk and why he is there. I do find another report of a monk. Now I believe this is again near Minster, and this is where I believe there's a flying club now. I guess it's remote control planes, and there's some creek beds and some marshland around there. From what I understand, a gentleman was over there bird watching in the 80s, and he sets up a little tent over by one of the creek areas, and he's looking out with binoculars. When he lowers his binoculars, he sees a monk standing by one of the creek beds. He brings his binoculars back up, try and get a better look, but he can't see the monk through his binoculars. Yet he puts them down, and yet the monk is still standing there. Once again, he looks through by binoculars. The monk's not there, but when he lowers them, he can see the monk clearly. He's really puzzled by this, and at that time he's not thinking that this is a ghost monk or anything like that. He just thinks this is weird. There's a monk standing in the field by the creek bed. Do you think it's weird? Yeah, it is weird. But saying that, I've seen some videos on TikTok recently where you've got groups of druids just walking out in the fields in the middle of nowhere, and if somebody happened to see that, they could think they're watching a ghost of a load of druids. So he's not jumping to that conclusion that this is a ghost. He gets out of his little hide thing that he's made, he stands up, and he starts to walk towards this monk. He's going to ask him, what's he doing over there? The monk is about 200 yards away, so it's actually quite a distance. And again, as he got closer to the monk, he describes this monk as wearing all black, but again, with a bit of a glow around him. And he thought this was really peculiar, and that is when he started thinking, maybe this monk isn't real. Maybe it's my imagination, or maybe I'm seeing a ghost. As the bird watcher gets slightly closer, the monk starts walking towards where the creek bed is. Now I say creek bed, this is more like a marshy land that goes through the area. The monk seemed to walk across this bit of land without dropping down in level. Does this signify during his time that creek wasn't quite like that and it was a completely flat land? As he crossed over that bit of land, he started to fade out until the gentleman couldn't see him no more. but not fade out, using that word I've just used, dematerialised in front of him. This actually shocked the gentleman, but not putting himself off, he ran over to make sure that the monk hadn't fallen down and it was still, making sure it wasn't really a real person, and he checked there was nothing over there, and he went back and again reported this back to the BBC when they went to do their investigation. So I like the fact that we've got some BBC stuff coming up there, and we've got some more coming up about the BBC. I'm not always relying on the BBC. I do like the local input, which we have next. Now, unfortunately on this one I don't have a precise date on it, but it's between 1920 and 1940. There are a group of people walking along the north shore of Sheerness, and this is getting late in the evening, so around about 10 o'clock. It is dark, and they see a lantern out in the sea. And they start hearing these voices screaming for help. This group of people run down to the shoreline, and they say in the distance, not far, only about 50 yards in front of them, they can see an upturned hull of a boat. And they can hear people shouting and screaming. They take the decision that they were going to make a chain out into the sea, and the last one was going to swim out to where the hull of the boat was upturned. As they do this, the man who's swimming out the furthest gets to where he thinks the hull of the boat is, looks up, takes a deep breath, and can't see nothing. The other gentlemen that are closer to the shore are still shouting to him, help them, help them. But he's there where the boat should be, and he can't see them. But the people closer to the shore can still see them. So again, rather confusing, a bit bizarre, and he turns around and swims back, and as he gets to the end of the chain where people are standing and floating around, he looks back, and where he's just come from, he sees the hull of the boat upside down and the lantern with the gentleman around by the boat. Again, he swims, he thinks maybe he got confused, he swims directly towards them, keeping his eye this time on the lantern, and as he gets to where the lantern should be, it disappears. There's nothing there again. It's nothing but calm water. He swims back. This time, as he gets back, he realises that all the people that are there with him have a shocked look on their face. And they said, it's disappeared. As it just vanished. And he drags himself out. He's gasping for breath. He's exhausted. He's gone there twice, come back. And they all sit there just looking out to sea, and they can't work out what has just happened. A few months later, they're in one of the local inns, and again somebody comes in shouting that there's an upturned hull of a boat by that beach. A few of them run out. Two of the guys that have done this before wander out slowly towards them and observe this time of other people going out there. And the same thing happens, that as people get close to this hull of the boat, it disappears. Over the years, there's been more reports of this hull of this boat and this lantern turning up and disappearing in front of people. We have no explanation now. Unfortunately, where the Isle of Sheppey is, there have been a lot of shipwrecks and a lot of things that have happened in history. The island is notorious for smuggling, and there was a lot of smugglers over there, and mainly for wool. So wool was their big thing that they smuggled in. Well, I say wool, what they didn't smuggle the wool in, they smuggled things in and out hidden in the wool. And this caused quite a few upsets in the local community, because they actually believed that the smuggling made the area go bankrupt due to two corrupt officers. It sounds like things don't really change, does it? No, politics isn't corrupt. No. Not having that. Just going to take a couple minutes to talk about Lower Road. Now, Lower Road has got two things have happened on Lower Road. Now, one of them is the disappearing car or the disappearing girl. I can't work this out. There seems to be conflicting reports around about the same time in the 1950s that a car is seen going off the road, and when people go there, the car isn't there. Other people say that they're walking along that road and they get overtaken by a car that then disappears as it literally goes past them. Other people say at that same point is where when they're driving along in their car, they see a girl standing by the side of the road, and that this is the night time, and she is glowing like what you think the old typical ghosts are glowing like. And as they get towards her, she steps out in front of the car and passes through the car. This all seems to be around the same location. I believe there's I'm looking on some Google map now, and it is a freeway car sales centre that is pinpointed on that spot. And you want to go down a little bit, probably about that far on Google Earth, to see if that makes no sense to you at all. You want to go down before the junction. There's another road there. Hold on, I'll give you a better. See what that road is called. That was just embarrassing. Can't believe I've done that. It is called. It's Skulls Road. Do you know what? Perhaps research is a good thing I should do a bit more often. Right at the turning of, well, I can't believe this happened. I could scrap this video and do this again about the monks. It says Minster. There's got a sign there pointing to an abbey. So there is an abbey. So that is why there's a monk there. That explains everything, doesn't it? That's embarrassing. No. So I'll see how I feel about this when I edit this video, if I keep this in or not. But anyway, right where that sign says Abbey is where the A2500, I think it is. Yeah, so right where the sign says Abbey is where this car is meant to be and where this girl is meant to be. But apart from that, on the fields next to this site is where we get our first introduction to the legend of the Beast of Sheerness and the beasts of the Isle of Sheppey. And again, Neil Arnold has done a book on it. You can go and look at his book, and it's what he specialises in. And I'm not going to match anything he says. I'm using the stuff that I found out, and as you just found out, my research is pretty flawed sometimes. Now, this beast is seen on the other side of Lower Road, heading up towards Minster Abbey. Not that I've just looked this up. Minster Abbey is up that way, and this is land actually between Lower Road and Minster Abbey. This is where we see the first sign of this beast, and it is described as a big black hairy beast with bright red eyes. A typical beast that we seem to get reports of all over the place. I do wonder why these are so common. There may be an explanation that I'm going to come to later in this video, but again, yes, it's described as having these bright red eyes and chases anyone who goes near it and chases them off that area of land where it is. Now, we are looking way back in history when these reports started, from the 18th century right the way up till the 1940s, where this beast is seen on this bit of land here. More recent events have happened on the other side, but we're going to get to in a minute. But again, this is these reports of a man walking along with his dog. This report is a little bit dramatic. The man says that the beast grabs his dog and eats the dog in one big bite. So this is from the 1920s. But the reports over that area and the whole of Sheerness and the Isle of Sheppey are of this black beast that hunts all the moorland or the grass areas. There are constant reports of beasts on the island. Again, this is covered more in depth by Neil Arnold. So if you're really interested in these beasts, check him out. I've not actually read much of his stuff, but what I have is really good, and he's far greater in the knowledge of these areas. He lives over there by Rochester, so he's going to have a lot more details on this. Now moving swiftly on, I think we better. We are moving to the Old House at Home pub. Thank you to local residents that contacted me. I reached out to them because I was really confused. The reason being is that I was doing some research and the stories I heard didn't match up to the research I was finding on the Old House at Home pub. That's because the Old House Home at pub that I was deep diving and researching is one in Sheerness and not the one in Queensborough. And the one in Sheerness is gone and the one in Queensborough is still there. And the one in Sheerness isn't near the sea and the one in Queensborough is near the sea. So I was going down, I was getting so confused. I reached out to the local community and they corrected me and put me on the right path. Now what's important about this Old House at Home pub? Well, it faces Deadman's Island. Now, Deadman's Island is basically a mud bank or marshes that is sticking out into the River Medway. And this is where you'll find over 200 bodies stuck in the mud over there. Now, this is now a site of Natural England and you can't go on there. I did try to, that's a little fly flying in front of me. I did try to get permission to go here a few years ago, or actually beginning of last year, and it was refused. I do understand that you can get kayaks out there from the local pool. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go there and sit myself. My permission was refused. I believe it was bird nesting season or something like that, so they wouldn't facilitate me going there. Now what happened over the centuries, that bit of land on Deadman's Island has been used as a dumping ground for people that died on prison ships. Now prison ships were very popular in the 18th century until the early 19th century, and they were moored just outside Sheerness. And not only that, the passing ships that had cholera outbreaks on there would offload their bodies and put them onto Deadman's Island. What we can't account for is the amount, 200 bodies on there, that's a lot of bodies. Now, they're only ones that have been found. We don't know what other ones may be underneath that mud. They've also been dug in and covered over, but what is left of the coffins are broken open now, and it's not uncommon for bits of bones to wash up along the shoreline, along Queensborough and onto the other side of the island. So these are moving mud flats that probably will disappear over, probably in our lifetime they may disappear, and these bodies will probably have to end up being removed. I know they want to try and protect the land because it's a site of special interest for birds and all that sort of stuff, but you're fighting against Mother Nature. You've probably got a losing battle there, and these coffins that have been buried there are popping up and opening up and just floating away. What I'm going to say now is that I don't think I've ever been to a place where I walk along and anyone I met, I just opened it to them and said, do you know any spooky stories about this area? And straight away it was, yes, let me tell you about this. This happened five times. This happened when I was walking along that beach area. I walked along here and the first person I spoke to was a lady and her husband, and they had a dog. And I asked them, excuse me, do you mind, have you ever heard any creepy stories? And their answer was, yeah, definitely, you're in the right place. They said over night time, they walk along that seafront and often they hear noises coming over the river of screaming, people crying, yet they know they're not real. They know these are the ghost sounds coming over from Deadman's Island. I was like, well, how often do you hear this? And she goes, oh, quite often. We don't really think about it now. And I thought that was quite bizarre. And they said to me, take a walk out onto the pier. Now, this is not the real pier. This is the mud pier that goes out into the estuary. And I walked along there. And I guess I was expecting to hear something. And you see in the video, I walk out there, it's at sunset, and it is the most picturesque thing that you can imagine. It is beautiful. I stood there and listened, And what I could hear was wind coming through poles on the ships, and they do make strange noises. I know that at Southend, and when you go up to Norfolk Falls, you do hear that wind passing through the ropes. But that wasn't what she was talking about. What she described was people crying, and you know, the upset, the I keep thinking of the lady at the beginning of the video from the BBC when she's going the woo noise. But yeah, that is what they are describing. I come back, and then I was walking along by the pub, and another gentleman was walking along with his dog. It's that time of night, everyone's walking along with their dogs and taking their dogs for a walk. And I said to him, do you know any ghost stories about this area? He goes, yeah. He goes, I do. He goes, my dad swore blind that he was standing right by this pier. He could see loads of figures moving across the water towards the pub, just gliding towards the pub, and they all vanished as they got closer to him. He goes, don't matter what you said, he stuck by that story. He insisted that that is what he see. Then I was walking back after I'd been to the pub, which we'll come to in a minute. I was walking back along, and I see another lady walking along with her dog, and I said, excuse me, have you ever heard of any ghost stories along here? And again she went, yeah. She goes, we hear cries and sounds coming over the water quite a few evenings during the year. I said, is there a particular time for this? She goes, no. She goes, it can be summer, can be winter, can be autumn. All of a sudden you'll just get this sound of these crying and this distress sound coming over from Deadman's Island. And you talk to a lot of more locals, and they'll start talking about the beast.
There was a monster, for a better way of putting it, and it fed on the brains of people that it caught. And what I was told, that this thing could whip your brain out without you knowing it, and would leave you standing as if nothing had happened.
Now the beast over there, again, is described as a big, black, hairy beast, dog-like, shuck-like, with bright red eyes that will chase anyone away from Deadman's Island. In the 1830s, we have a farmer that is working the land over there, whose farmhand goes missing, and the explanation he gives that this beast went up to the farmhand and sucked his brains out while the farmhand was standing there, and then ate his body afterwards. Do we believe that? Is this a convenient excuse for what really happened to the farmhand? But these stories are embedded in the myths. The reports of this brain-eating beast are all over the place. Now, it is so common that, you know, back in the 19th century, people feared going onto Deadman's Island in case they got their brains ate by this beast. Walking along there that night, I can imagine that paranoia, looking over to where Deadman's Island is and the shores on the other side. You can imagine that temptation of going over there. But there's a caveat to these stories that you may not like, because it's not really paranormal. Now, I don't want to poo-poo things. I know you come here for spooky stories, but if there's an explanation there, I want to give it to you. So when I was there, I walked into the old house at home pub, went in, introduced myself, and I think his name was Ellis, was shocked that the night before he'd watched my video on Tilbury Docks, and he couldn't believe it. That, you know, I don't know who's more shocked, me or him. Me that he had actually watched the video, and I found someone who'd watched the video, or that for him that he'd watched me the night before. And funny enough, he didn't tell me if he liked the video or not. Perhaps I shouldn't. Probably happy I didn't ask. But I asked them about the ghosts of the building, and they were like, first of all, and everyone was going, go on, tell me about this, tell me about that, go on, what about this? And the young lad there was saying that only a few days ago he told his mum that he sees someone standing outside on the street, and when he went out there, this figure disappeared. Bar staff, when I asked one of the young bar staff there, she first of all said, no, nothing's ever happened. Later on, and I told her I was going to put this in here, later on, she turned around and said that not long ago, that her and her other barmaid were down in the cellar when the doors above shut and they got stuck in the cellar. And no one done that, that happened on their own. So there are things there. Now, footsteps are often heard around that pub. And there's one area there that they took me to. And I was a bit concerned when they turned around and said, take him to the cellar, take him to the cellar. I was thinking, geez, was my video that bad? And it's like, but they took me down to the cellar. And this cellar is where they hear things. They hear footsteps in there, shuffling around, things move around that shouldn't have happened. And, you know, there's video here. I don't know how much I can put in the video because I'm so appreciative of them taking me around the cellar. It was so nice for them to do that. And yeah, it is a creepy cellar. Very low ceiling. And I can imagine if you're down on your own, you can get creeps. Funny enough, when me and the guy went down there, we didn't know if someone was down there. And we walked around the corner and she's standing there frightening the life out of us. But walking through, you can imagine it because it is quite low. And there's one particular area there that we agreed that I won't film. And it's a bricked up archway. And they're not allowed to remove it. But apparently that archway leads right the way down through the end of the buildings. Now it's a strip of buildings with another pub at the end. I think it's the Crown down the other end. And I believe that tunnel goes right over through the buildings. And the reason I believe that is because of smuggling. So when we talk about smuggling, how do you describe Queensborough and the house at home, the old house at home? It's like the traffic centre for smugglers. It had everything. It was perfectly located. It was great access to London. It had perfect access to the River Thames and going over onto the Kent coast. There are many tales, dark tales of smuggling in that area. Maybe, just maybe, or completely possible, Deadman's Island was a no-go zone because it was a perfect location to unload their smuggled goods and load it back up via the old house at home. These tunnels underneath that building would allow them to move it away from that pierhead down to the other end of the street. It's perfect access. These ghosts and these beasts are a perfect opportunity to come up with and say, if you go there, you can get your brains out, to stop people going onto Deadman's Island, to stop people going anywhere near that end of the island. Fear and putting this myth there would stop people treading on the smuggler's ground. I think that's a completely plausible explanation for where these stories do come from. That said, what is going on in the old house at home is bizarre, it is creepy, and it has sort of a bit of a background with other families that have had trauma that have moved in there. So I'm just going to read out this little report here that happens to a family that ended up living in that pub. Tragedy recalled recently. In a look back over 50 years ago, I drew attention to the tragedy at the Full Measure public house in Wilmington, in which the licensee, Mrs. Holdershaw, and her daughters perished, while 3 children jumped from the bedroom window. Of those 3, Bert, who was on his holiday from Thorn Grammar School, died from burns and shock 2 days later. Mr. Sidney Holdershaw, now of the old house at home, Queensborough, Kent, writes to me, and he and his sister Blanche were the other 2 that survived, severely burnt and still carrying the scars. He was 11 and she was a few years older, and the events stand out very vividly in their memories. A few months later he went to live with his mother and brother on the Isle of Sheppey and has lived there ever since. Now this was dated in 1950. So we are looking at the turn of the 20th century there, so 1900. So this man had lived through tragedy and he moved to that pub. Do people bring trauma with them? And those events that come on, can they push it off? Now there was a question come up a little while ago from another paranormal team that had been on the Isle of Sheppey. And they were talking about time slips around this area of this pub. There have been a lot of reports of smugglers being seen coming up the foreshore. When I was talking to the residents there, not in the pub, but outside, they turned around and said that they believe that there is maybe something that gets replayed, because friends of theirs have seen boats moor up onto that foreshore and then disappear. And they've seen smugglers, what I call old sailors, walking up that pierhead and then disappearing or dematerialising. At the same time, we have Leo Bay that is dead opposite, literally on the sort of the basin of that little inlet. And Leo Bay again has a lot of reports of strange sounds coming over from Deadman's Island, but also on the ground itself around there is said to have quite a lot of ghosts. We are talking about grey ladies and about men that are seen walking the streets and then vanishing. I also know I did speak to a lady there that was telling me about her house. That her house over that side, that she's convinced that her house is haunted. And that things move around in the house and she hears footsteps and doors shutting when no one else is in the building. So even today we have stuff happening over on the Isle of Sheppey. And when I was walking along that seafront, you can imagine the history there. The smugglers, the old prison ships sitting outside, the tragedy that happened in that area. No wonder we have that possibility of ghosts belonging there. Now, so many tragic events happened. Are the spirits of these victims trying to escape? On that note, we have visions along that foreshore of people scrambling out of that mud for survival. And again, they vanish. People have been walking their dogs along there or walking with their kids along there, and have looked down to see these people scrambling out of the mud and then disappearing. So many reports of these sounds coming over from Deadman's Island, it's hard to ignore it. Now, if we're looking for a natural explanation, could it be the sailing ships? Could it be that the marker posts over there are creating some weird sound effect? But I'm not going to say that these people, that we are talking hundreds and hundreds of people that have heard these crying sounds and all this coming over from the foreshore, coming over from Deadman's Island. The pub. Now, you look at the history of that pub. It's the smugglers' heartland. It's where they would go. It was their meeting point. That pub has got so much history tied to smuggling. Now, you go back through the old residents there, you're going to know that they were involved in smuggling there all the way through. That doesn't go on in that building without the landlord knowing. The history is so engraved in that area of smuggling. Very much like when you used to go to Fobbing, the old ship inn at the bottom of Fobbing, that is now the shipping cottages, that was engraved into smuggling of the area of the Thames Estuary. These are in parallel. For once, I didn't find much. I'm sure Charles Dickens mentions this place in a book, but you've only got to think of the Charles Dickens books when smuggling comes up and all that. It is ingrained in our history. These bodies from the prison ships, we've got people escaping from there onto the land. What happened to them? Were they accepted into community? Did they escape? Did they go across? We've got, going back to King Canute. King Canute was come through that area as well. So the history of the Isle of Sheppey is very important to this area. Anyway, I think I've gone on enough about the Isle of Sheppey. I would like to go back and do more, because I know there's more ghost stories on the other side. But again, thank you for all your support. I love talking to you in your comments and taking your advice. The negative ones do make me laugh, and I do apologise. Someone said I take too long getting to the meat of the topic. I mean, we could shorten this video down to the Isle of Sheppey. Yeah, it's got beasts on it and there's dead men on there and there's an island, and that's the end of the story. Though we've got to, I want to give the history of the area. I'm going to try and stick to doing 2 videos a week. Don't know how it's going to work out. It's getting tight for this week, for next Tuesday and Friday, but this one I hope it's going up on Friday. Again, I went to Werner Flow the other week. I'm going to try and put a little clips in there of going up to Werner Flow. It's one that was in the G-Cross video, so as I'm talking now, hopefully I can put some photos and video up of being up there. It's lovely. It's nice to see these places, even though I've already done the video of it. It's nice to go and visit them, and I've done that whilst doing the Liverpool video. But again, thank you for your support. Hit that like button, put the notifications on, And yeah, I've got some little bits coming up in the members only section. I've done a little drive around Mucking to show some of the little ghost sites around there. I'm going to stick that on up in the members feed, so look out for that one. And look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.